Aum Gangadipataye Namaha. Namaste. So now we come to the verse, which is, in my opinion, the heart of it all. Let's go right to the verse. When viewed from the standpoint of the eternally self-existent cause, even the 3, 7, or 21 worlds will appear to be real. But when one sees only the names and forms of the world as real, then even Brahman, their cause, will appear to be absolutely non-existent or void, śūnyā. Reality is a choice, or rather it presents you with a choice. You can see the world as real, or you can see the self as real. When I say real, I mean absolute, real in itself, intrinsically real, real with a capital R. So if you see, as he says here, from the standpoint of the eternally self-existent cause, in other words, if you view your experience from the assumption that I am Brahman, then even the most fantastic imaginary worlds of the Vedas or science fiction or whatever will appear true. They'll appear true to the degree that you are willing to imagine them to be true. And the same goes for their inhabitants and all the activities there and the whole shooting match. It's a dream. It can be a very long dream. It can last for millions of years in Satyuga. But it's still a dream because it has a beginning and an end. But it appears to be real because it reflects the real attributes of Brahman, which are Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, and bliss. Get it? So even though we know it's an appearance, it appears real. But we see it as just Brahman. Just Brahman playing around. God on his day off. So the other way of looking at things, and here's the problem, okay? The other way of looking at things is that the material world is absolute, the ground of reality, and that everything, including consciousness, comes from the material world. Inevitably ends up in alienation, depression, skepticism, and ultimately voidness, nihilism, śūnyata. Everything is actually nothing. If you break down matter into components of atomic constituents, and then you break those down into their subatomic particles, after that, reality is only a bunch of electrical or magnetic charges floating around in these tiny orbits at very high frequencies in an extremely small space, and looking the other way. There's endless galaxies and clusters of galaxies going on and on and on forever, and not a sign of life in any of them. Oh my God, we're alone. It's frightening. It's Maya. Okay, we see that because we are projecting, we are assuming that this is real. You see, just like Buddha described it perfectly 2,600 years ago, and I made a video, a very detailed video on this in the Mulaparayaya Sutta, the superimposition of the ego. In fact, that's the title of the video, the superimposition of the ego. So I'm not going to go over all that again, but Shankara got it right too. He said, we superimpose. Well, what do we superimpose? A conceptual structure, a map, a system of values. Whoops, some power just went out. A way of looking at the world. That I am an individual, and I have real existence, and I have relationships with all these other things. And it goes on, and we build this whole house of cards based on it. And that's our reality. But then when we investigate this reality down to its roots, we find that it's empty. There's nothing like a self there. And that leads to alienation. See, and the anger and frustration due to this alienation from reality manifests as humanity's destructive activities. But as long as we want to look at the world as an object, and then necessarily our own selves as well, because if we can have a relationship with an object, then we are also an object. And how do we do it? It's a magic trick. Jnanananda, my Buddhist guru, wrote a book called The Magic of the Mind. And I paraphrased it in more modern English in my book, The Magical Mind. It's out there somewhere on the internet. Anyway, as soon as you observe an object, as soon as a sense impression comes in through any of the 6 senses, including the mind, and you identify, the mind first seizes on it and then identifies it. In other words, it aligns it with some previous memories and some terminology and names it. And this is the name, this is the form. Ka-ching. Okay. And then, once we've named it, once we've named this form, as being different from all other forms, we say, this is mine. Make my day. This is my day. I'm having a day. It's my day. And now I'm going to make it. So we identify the things as mine, and also to some degree as I. And we project this sense of self, ownership, and relationship onto the world. It's just like AR, assisted reality, the latest VR, semi-VR craze, Google glasses and Apple, whatever, and all the rest. You're projecting an overlay, superimposition on reality. The superimposition is the assumption that I exist. And the way the mind tricks you is that it creates a bunch of false impressions of I by saying, this is my body, this is my mind, these are my books, this is my house, this is my camera, and so on. Now I have a bunch of impressions that I can look back on and remember in the future and say, oh, there is an I. Well, there must be an I because he owns all these things, right? This is exactly how it works. And this is what the Buddha said. Look at the video. So then, the other way to look at it is to assume, just like we assume that the ego exists, is to assume that God exists in the beginning, or in a more advanced stage, that Brahman exists. and that we are one with him. He says here, when viewed from the standpoint of the eternally self-existent cause. Well, what does that mean? I did it. I made it. It's mine. It's I. When you view the world from the assumption of I, it turns into objects. When you view the world from the assumption of aham brahmasmi, it turns into the self. This is the best magic trick of all. Using the same exact mechanism, psychological mechanism, which we will go over in detail in the next video, that uses the same mechanism that makes the ego to bring us in alignment with self-realization. And how does it do that? The same way, by creating a bunch of, not necessarily false, but really unsupported or unsubstantiated impressions that I am Brahman, I am everything, I am all, I am the cause, I made everything. This morning when I woke up from sleep, boom, the whole thing popped into existence. Neat trick, huh? Until then it was gone. It was void. But then, as long as I exist, the individual, the false self, the world exists, other people exist, objects exist, time and space exist, motion and all the rest that go along, the physics that go along with that. And the psychology of relationships and meaning and symbolic codes, languages, all of that stuff. It all comes into existence out of nothing. Not out of nothing, out of Brahman. It's reflecting the reality of Brahman, just like a mirage in the desert. When you go in the desert and you see water far away, you don't go running after it because you know it's a mirage. In the same way, when you see an object or another person out there, you don't believe that, oh, that's another I. I am an I and that's another I, and then we have this relationship and blah, blah, blah. No. You believe, I have brought this into existence as Brahman. Anyway, when we assume aham brahmasmi, that I am Brahman, in the beginning it's unsubstantiated, but then things like that start happening. Synchronicity, coincidence. And after a while, it becomes plausible because you have a background of impressions that look to you like memories of something that really happened, where you did identify with Brahman, and by golly, the universe kind of worked out, you know. Now, I'm not saying that this is real. I'm saying it's a reality that you can choose. And if you choose it, you will find yourself a lot more relaxed and happier guy. Because now you're not, in a sense, you're not responsible for anything. You as a human being are not responsible for anything anymore. You as God are not only responsible for everything, you are everything. Tattvamasi. Whatever you see, you are that. Come on, it's only logical. Even this material body could not exist without the rest of the creation. So it's part of me. It's part of us. It's part of everything. Next time we'll tell you exactly why. Om Tat Sat. Om Harihi Om.